Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Dean Speaker Series lecture. The Dean Speaker Series was created to bring to our campus outstanding scholars and leaders from the field of business, government, and education to share thoughts and insights with UNC Kenan-Flagler, the university as a whole, and the community at large. The Dean Speaker Series is made possible through support of the Archie K. Davis Endowment and is managed primarily by our students who select and invite the leaders that they are most interested in learning from. Before I introduce our speaker for this evening, I'd like to invite you all to the final Dean Speaker event for this academic year. So that will be Monday, March 26th, and we will welcome UNC alumnus Alan Murray, who is Deputy Managing Editor and Executive Editor online for the Wall Street Journal. I've met Alan. He's a great guy doing great work at the Wall Street Journal. It should be a really compelling talk, so very happy to welcome him here, and you're all welcome to come back in about a month for that talk. At the conclusion of this evening's lecture, Allison Fergale, who is the Mary Farley Ames Lee Fellow and Associate Professor of Organizational Behavior at UNC Kenan-Flagler, will offer a vote of thanks to our speaker on behalf of our faculty, staff, and students. And finally, before I introduce tonight's speaker, I'd like to recognize a number of special guests. In particular, I'd like to welcome the members of our Dudley Carroll Society who are with us here today. We created this society for those who have made planned gifts to UNC Kenan-Flagler, and earlier this afternoon, we held our inaugural event to recognize their generosity to the school. The society is named for Dudley DeWitt Carroll, the first dean of the business school, starting in 1919. And of course, Carroll Hall on the UNC campus, where many of us had offices for a while, bears his name. With us this evening is really a large number of members from Dean Carroll's family. So if I can just ask the members of the Carroll family to stand up so we can recognize them, I think that would be appropriate. "31 years. That's how long he was dean. What do you say, Jack? We are pleased to have with us here this evening also Chancellor Emeritus James Measer and his wife Susan, who were here in the first row, and the person I just got finished teasing, the former Dean of Kenan-Flagler, Jack Evans. So welcome to you as well. Tonight we are honored to welcome Jim Clifton. Since 1988, Jim has served as CEO of Gallup, a leader in organizational consulting and public opinion research. His most recent innovation, which is called the Gallup World Poll, is designed to give the world a voice in virtually all key global issues. Under his leadership, Gallup has achieved a 15-fold increase in its billing volume and expanded Gallup from a predominantly US-based company to a worldwide organization with 40 offices in 30 countries and regions. He's the author of many articles and of the book, The Coming Jobs War, which will be the topic for his lecture this evening. In addition to his work with Gallup, Jim serves on several boards and is chairman of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. He has received honorary degrees from Jackson State, Medgar Evers, and Bellevue University. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished guest speaker, Jim Clifton.
Testing. I think it came on, didn't it? Yep. Is that a live mic? It's pretty good sound here. So, well, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for having me. We have a. I think Jim and Brad might know this. Probably kind of get a kick. So I was born and raised in Nebraska. My dad taught school at the University of Nebraska for 20 years, and I think Jim probably knows. Now I live in Washington. I live there. That's what I thought. I don't think the mic's on. How about now? My name is Jim Clifton. No, I was going to... So I'm a Nebraskan before I moved to Washington. Nobody's actually from Washington. But there's a story that follows you when you're a Nebraskan, especially in Washington and New York, and you've heard this so many times. By the way, what I'm going to tell you is not a joke, it's actually a story. But we had a Nebraska football game. This is years ago, thank goodness. We were playing Oklahoma. That's kind of, Oklahoma is to us what Duke is to you. And, but anyway, it was in Lincoln, Nebraska. ABC was covering it. It was one of those Thanksgiving Day games. And the ABC Sports announcer, the lady, came over to interview one of our players. I'm not going to say his name because some of you probably follow all this stuff. And so rather than ask her about what do you think about the defense, she asked him a sensitive question. You're asking a Nebraska running back a sensitive, a thinking question? Okay. The thinking was not his big thing, I don't think. But anyway, she said to him, so he's sitting in his chair, and he's got a Nebraska helmet. I got to tell you, the Nebraska helmet is just plain white. There's nothing on it except a block N. There's a red block N on it. So she said to him, said his name, if the N on your helmet didn't stand for Nebraska, what might it stand for? So he thinks, because he's going to nail it, he's got to get this right, and he thinks for a long time, and he finally says, I'd have to say knowledge. and so you and I have been introduced so many times, being from the place where, in sense from Well, you guys, I'm going to, is this being recorded? Yes, it is. Okay. I'm going to hang a few reckless points on you, if you can take it. And then I'm going to throw it open for some reckless questions. And then there's a car that I get in and race out of here in case it gets too crazy. By the way, I want to tell you something. I changed a lot of stuff I was going to say. I thought it was 70% students, and this is my own fault, by the way, and 30% public. And then I was briefed, thank goodness, that it's the other way. So then I changed some of my remarks. Gallup's done a whole bunch of research on sort of maybe where the world is going and United States relationship with everything else. I'll cover a few of those things. But I also want to make sure, I just had a great hour with some unusually smart kids, and I told you that we're recruiting here and we've got some stars, and so now Gallup has its own kind of North Carolina strain in it, and which is great. But I want to make a few points about some recommendations I have for MBAs coming out of great schools like this, what they should emphasize so they can move into the leadership channels as fast as they can. I want to say one other thing too. Congratulations to everything that's happening here. Our North Carolina kids, I don't want to say out of nowhere quickly, that's not fair, but you've built, one of the, I don't know, maybe 5 best public universities in the whole, Berkeley and Michigan and Virginia, and now all of a sudden North Carolina is just boom right there. But of all the national championships or whatever all you've won here, I mean that's a fantastic achievement. But I just want to tell you, congratulations! It's a great privilege to be here, and thank you for the students that you've provided so far. I don't really write. We have a lot of people at Gallup. We sell millions of books. We have a Gallup Press, and all that stuff works real well. But I just turned 60, and I was told a few of this before, but I started looking over the unbelievable bull run that this country's had over my lifetime. So I was about like these kids over here, and the country just never stopped. The kind of achievement that we have had has been just absolutely colossal. I'm surprised we don't teach more about it in business schools and at universities. Well, anyway, when I turned 60, I started kind of looking around, and I got all these young people in Gallup in the United States, around the world, and I started thinking, gee, I wonder what their 30 years is going to be like. And I started getting a pretty bad feeling. And when I was about their age, I was watching TV, and they had a panel of economists on, both left and right leaning. And I'll never forget this. And I don't know, maybe it was the words, this kind of person, but Japan and Germany, because my dad, my uncles, and aunts, everybody built stuff. And so Japan and Germany gave you the willies when you were about my age, because everybody had metal in their bones and all that, at least my dads and uncles did. But anyway, what they said was, because of manufacturing, Japan and Germany are both going to overtake the United States of America in the next 30 years. So I'm just like these guys right here. But when that goes into the neurons, the old burned highways don't accept that very well. You can't help it. But they went on to meticulously describe that Japan would grow to about 5 trillion, Germany would grow to about 4, and the United States would be at about 3.8. You guys, it's just such a great case history. It's a case history of all case histories, because that prediction by fantastic economists is right now. You can look and see how they did. You know how they did? Pretty darn well. They nailed Japan, nailed Germany, but they missed. I mean, you talk about, if you ever said one of economists been wrong, I'd cite this one. Because what we did is we bowed up to a GDP of about 15 trillion. Do you see what that is? And that's why I always say, I'm always surprised we don't write about this or teach that, because something really spectacular happened in human development. Can you imagine coming into your boss saying, how are sales, and you're supposed to be at 3 million, but you actually came in at 15 million? I outperformed the market a little bit here. But that's what this country did as a tribe of people. So on a particularly nerdy day, I sat down and added the stubs above where we were supposed to perform to where we did perform. If you add the stubs over 30 years, it's $100 trillion. Living in Washington, by the way, you don't know what a big number is. I've been in meetings where somebody will go 60 billion, and you go, wait a minute, is that 60 billion or 60 million? Then the whole table will go, no, wait a minute, is it 60 billion or 60 million? That's a symptom of something being very wrong, because we don't even know what big numbers are. But just trust me on this one. I know there's some math majors in here, and they'll agree with me. 100 trillion, that's a big one. But that's how much we outperformed where we were supposed to be. And so you say, how do we have all this stuff? It's because of that $100 trillion. How do you have a military? I asked some generals one day. I said, we're spending almost, it's about 800 billion, then you spend another couple hundred between Afghanistan and Iraq. And I said, that's a lot of money. I said, what exactly is the mission and purpose? What do we spend it for? I love the military. I wasn't like saying, what the hell do we spend? I just want to know. They're real smart. Leaders are all smart and all that. You know what they told me? And they're real openly. It's not, but we spent, let's just call it $1 trillion to make it easy. It's $1 trillion a year. If there's war, we want to be able to win on 3 fronts in the first 24 hours of war. I had never heard that in my entire life. So that means that if we suddenly have war with Russia, China, who the third would be? Canada? North Korea or somebody. You spend that because the buttons we hit or whatever it is, total annihilation, we win in 24 hours. You pay $1 trillion for that a year. Always sounded good to me. Doesn't sound as good right now when we bring in about $2.5 trillion of taxes and we spend about $3.5 trillion. Now money's starting to make a lot of difference. Think about that one number, you guys, though, when you spend that. Russia, are they a competitor of ours? I don't know. Their whole GDP is only a little over $1 trillion. You see, we spend the same amount just on all that neat stuff, which is the same amount as the whole GDP that those Russians have. Well, same with India. What's India's? 1.2? I don't know what it is, something like that. But it's about the same. But you see how insanely rich we are? Look at medicine. Boy, that's a lot to think about. You know what our bill is a year in medicine? $2.5 trillion. $2.5 trillion bucks. It's the same as It's like Russia and India's, all the money they have to do everything they do, we spend more than that just on the medicine, just on healthcare for ourselves. We spend $8,000 a person. Here's some really good countries that are doing really, Australia, Canada, France, Germany, and England. They spend less than $4,000 a person. Now you think, well, I know, but I wouldn't want to be there if I had something wrong with me. I'd rather be here. Would you? Here's something really important to know. You know those countries I just told you? They spend less than half as much. They all live longer than we do. What the hell's wrong with that picture? So we spend double. I hope we don't go from 8,000 to 10,000, or maybe we'll die even faster. But you know what? Up until now, it hasn't mattered because we had $100 trillion just to throw on stuff. Think about our space race, all that stuff we have up there. I mean, really brilliant. By the way, it wasn't actually Kennedy. It was actually a conversation Eisenhower had with Van Allen about putting a man on the moon. Started NASA. I mean, I don't know. That was probably $10 billion or something like that. But we put all that in there. You know what they're concluding now? That having people go into space is just showboating. I mean, really good American space pioneers say we never needed any of that. How many trillion was that? Well, who cares? Because we had $100 trillion to do it. We should only be sending robots up there is one aside. I'm not going to take. I'm Gallup. We're not supposed to take sides. By the way, they don't let me anywhere near the Gallup poll, so edit that out. But now, I took a group of, this is one of the things that got me writing all that stuff in that book, but I took a group of economists, and so we have our own economists at Gallup, then we have a bunch of outside universities, we pay them a stipend, and we call them senior scientists. But I said, here's what I want to know. I want you guys to be the economists now and tell me where America is going to be in 30 years. I want you to solve the puzzle for me. So they had to write that down, hand it in. I threw out a couple outliers. There were two guys who had Nobel Prizes. One I capped, and the other one was crazy, and I threw it out. But here's the thing. We're at 15, and they said that where we will be in 30 years, remember, this is, what did Yogi Berra say? It's deja vu all over again. Because now people are saying we're going to go down to China pretty quickly. So anyway, so I asked them, just do it for me. We're going to go from 15 to 30 trillion in 30 years. So you guys, one of you guys will be standing right here in the same place doing something just like this, saying, oh my God, we blew it all or we rose back up. 30 trillion. They say China will be somewhere between 60 to 80 trillion. You guys, that is a massive wipeout. Now, I know about development, they're just coming in from the third world and all of that, but it makes their economy so much bigger than this. That's where you get a real game changer. You know, there's that really obnoxious word, geopolitical. It's a pretentious word for just foreign relations, I think. You guys use it. When I'm at parties, I always try to get the word geopolitical in there somewhere. In Washington, this kind of makes me safe. But it changes our relationship with the whole world, changes China's. But here's the big question. What I wanted to know more than anything was, what's just the size of the pie going to be in 30 years? Could you give me that one? The answer is 200 trillion. There's just real basic kind of macroeconomics that are really helpful when you're thinking about what we can do with the United States. I don't mean to make this so American-centric, but it's going to go to 200 trillion. The world right now is at 60 trillion. And so what it means is $140 trillion of new stuff is coming in. New startup companies, new shoot-up companies, new customers, new stocks, and almighty jobs. So if you said, where are the best jobs in the world going to show up? I'd say wherever the god of GDP reigns that 140 trillion. So what do? Well, we need to go back and take a real good look at whatever the hell happened that 30 years before and make sure we bottle that and do it again. Because we have got to get a disproportionate amount of that 140 trillion or this country really changes. More than the population can stand. Okay, so this is, I don't like to lay this on university people, but just stay with me. None of you have tomatoes, do you? Yeah, if you have tomatoes, get them ready. But Saturday I was the speaker at the Association of Governors. So they put the governors in a room in Washington, and I told them this. And boy, they really go quiet. And they rushed. I needed a police escort to get out of there, but kidding you. It was a joke, for God's sakes. I can't get a laugh out of this group up here. But you got to be open to this thought, and that is that as leaders, and we make incredible mistakes, man in space, incredible mistake. How we manage healthcare. Nothing in prevention. We just fix you. We just pick up the litter. We don't tell people not to litter. We've got to be open to the fact that we're wrong about innovation. If you don't like that one, I'll adjust it and say, we've given innovation the wrong responsibility. Because what we're doing at this university, I know we're doing it at the University of Nebraska. We bulldozed the, don't let this get back to JB. We bulldozed the state fairgrounds, fine with me. We built a big center of innovation. The president just packed $150 billion of innovation into the last budget. But you see, here's what we're doing. We need jobs so desperately. 20% of Americans, there's about 150 million Americans who want jobs, 20% of them are out of work. Remember, it says 9%, if I come over and shovel your snow for 1 hour, everybody in this room knows this, I think you pay me $20, that's all I did all week, and I'm an engineer out of work. The government doesn't count me as unemployed. So when you see unemployed, that didn't count me, and I'm an engineer out of work. So we're so desperately looking for jobs and GDP growth. I think we were at 1.6 or 7 or something last year. We've come to the conclusion that it's innovation. So we've moved all of our big multicolored chips at the poker table all to innovation. Then we watch that. And there are no damn jobs coming out of that at all. So you know what we do? We go, well, we must need more chips on innovation. We just keep putting more and more and more innovation. What I think is great is then you look at the Middle East, the Saudis and Abu Dhabi and Doha. So you know what they do? They go, oh, look at that. The whole trick is innovation. So then they build centers of innovation. Saudi Arabia is building a whole city just of innovation. You watch, there'll be nothing that comes out of there. They'll get nothing. What if it's the business model and entrepreneurship where all the multiple chips ought to go? What if you just took all that and moved it over there, and that's where you get the big rise? Now, and I'm sure that's the case. I want to tell you a story, and this thing is so hard to believe. You know who invented the internet? There's two guys, but the guy's name is Vint Cerf. And he's working at DARPA. I see some of you smiling, you know him. But Vince's just a nice guy. I mean, he's probably walking around Washington having lunch in there. He's a senior scientist at Gallup. He's actually at Google as their chief evangelist. Vint had the internet. By the way, if you look at that 100 trillion, if you just wanted to pick out one thing in there and say, what happened in that championship tournament between Japan and Germany, you could just say the internet. America invented the internet, Japan and Germany didn't. It changed everything. It's not just the internet, but all the technology around it and all that. So Vint is sitting over at DARPA,
And, he figured out how to get packets to fly across fiber optic. And you know what he had? He had his own internet set up right there in Washington for defense purposes. That's it. Innovation extraordinaire. Doesn't help our economy at all. We're just paying for it. He told me this story. I didn't read it. I didn't hear it from somebody else, just sitting right at a table, his wife, my wife. Unbelievable testimony. Not that big a deal to him. He didn't care. A U.S. senator comes over and says to him, he'd heard about it, and said, what is that thing? Let me see how it works. Vince shows it to him, and the U.S. senator goes, wow. He goes, this is unbelievable. He says, you know what we ought to do? We ought to throw it out into commerce and see if business people can make something out of this. This is the part that's hard to believe, but you got to be one honest, high-integrity guy, because this is what Vince said to me. He said back to the U.S. senator, fine with me, but I don't see what value they'll have for it. Can you imagine that for all of us that are American? Can you imagine that American conversation of the guy who invented the internet saying to somebody that had a big belief in entrepreneurship and commerce? What if he'd have missed his bus that day and didn't get over to see Vint? Everything would be different. And I'll tell you something else, if he hadn't have been there, we would have just been spending more money on innovation trying to figure things out. By the way, do you know who the senator was? Yeah, it's Al Gore. I don't even like him, and I tell that story about him. But those two guys, an inventor and the guy that put the cut. You see, the thing that nobody knows in Washington, nobody knows anywhere, is that innovation has no value whatsoever until a customer is standing next to it. That's the big blind spot in human development right now. We don't understand the value of a great business person alongside a great innovator. One of my favorite clients over the years, I've been CEO for 23 years. I've had the same job kind of my whole life. I was an interviewer in college and all that. You ever heard of a guy named Huizenga? Okay, yeah, a whole bunch. But I just want to give you this little case history to think about. I love this story as an American. Wayne's a garbage man. I think you're supposed to call him a sanitation manager? I don't know. He's a garbage man, Wayne is. But he's on the back of a truck. But you see, you don't know what Wayne's thinking. What he's thinking about is he wants to build something big. So he buys another garbage truck. But just to speed this up, he built a Fortune 500, one of the best in the country, waste management. It's real green, and by the way, it's a great place to work. It makes that list. It's just a magnificent company that he built. He built it in one lifetime. But the question I'd ask you, how good of an idea it is, what if I came to you and said, hey, I'm a garbage man. Let's build an incredible, insane garbage company together. Would any of you say, how does Jim come up with these ideas? Where's he getting these ideas? I'm going to mortgage my house to get a piece of that one. The next idea that he had was this one. I actually helped him with the research on it, but it was he's going to take movies and then get a whole bunch of little stores in strip malls and rent movies to you. You know the name of that company? Yeah, Blockbuster. It wasn't that good of an idea. I mean, renting movies and whatever else. But he built it into his second Fortune 500 company. I don't know if he ever graduated from college, by the way, or if he went. But he built his second one, and he built three. Then he built AutoNation. Nobody's built two in one lifetime, let alone three. But garbage, renting movies, and selling used cars. Let's cut to the chase. Bad idea, bad idea, bad idea. You see, what you have is you have a guy that has an unusual ability to create economic energy where none previously existed at all before. So you got to ask yourself, which one is it? Is it the idea, or is it that individual? I helped Ted Turner. He was. That's one of the good things about one of the things about turning 60 is a lot of these things over the past. You were actually there. You don't have to read about it. But he wanted to have 24-hour news. 24-hour news, it's okay. It's not that great of an idea. One of the breakthroughs some of us had with working with banks, this is a long time ago, you guys, about like you. They'd close the damn things at 2 in the afternoon. Do you remember that? So we did a bunch of research, just a big finding. We said, leave them open so people can actually use them when they get off work. And they were going, oh my God, this changes banking, you know. Be open when the customers can actually use us, you know. I don't want to be too far out on the forefront here, but 24-hour news was a bit the same way because you had to race home, depending on where you lived, to watch Walter Cronkite or whoever those other two guys were. But, you know, Ted built it into a huge thing. By the way, some of you know him, either one of them or both of them. The determination and optimism that are inside of him is really unusual. And you know it in the first 5 minutes when you're with him. I'm just saying this, but to think that you train that is hallucination. Develop it, yes, but it probably starts somewhere where we haven't completely figured this out yet. Meg Whitman, I always call the deal where you have a 24/7 garage sale where we just sell junk to each other all day and all night long. You want a big part of that one? That was eBay. Groupon, coupons. See, somebody's got to be pretty darn good to make all that work. But for some reason, wherever our civilization is developed as leaders, we keep thinking it's the idea. We got to be open to the ideas are a dime a dozen. I know that sounds cruel, but I was sitting in my office. Let's see what time it is. I was sitting in my office in Washington, and this lady who's got a lot on me in Washington, not that kind of got a lot on me. Mm-hmm. I better leave it there so I can get this over with and get the hell out of here. But she said, Jim, I need you over at the Academy of Sciences at 11:30. It's 9:30. And I said, what do you need? She said, well, there's a group of the people that run these American labs. I want you to come over and talk to them. So it's the head of NASA, NIH. They have kind of an association. MIT. They have an association there. But by the way, when you have this group, there's no place in the world that can think like that, like the people that work for these people in the room. And I said, what do you want me to say? She goes, I want you to tell them that you think that we have the wrong expectation for innovation. I said, I bet that'll go over well there. And so anyway, I said, listen, you guys, I said, you know what the message is. I said, but I have a question before I start. How many of you, I want a show of hands, there's not many, there's only like 35 of these really good ones. How many of you have inventions in your labs now that are ready to go and they just need customers? Every single hand went up. One guy, I don't know for sure which one it was, but he said that he had a invention bigger than the internet that just needed commercialized, exactly the same way as the internet. But see, that's why we got to ask ourselves, if we're going to make this next 30 years the same way, I mean, it seems so functional, so basic, but we got to say to ourselves, are we sure we've got our premise right? Innovation is huge, but we've got to give it the right expectation. Which one's the cart and which one's the horse? Everything I put together, and that's why I wrote that rant or therapy, the book, is that innovation's definitely the cart, and entrepreneurship, business model, and commercializing the idea is definitely the horse. You need them both, but if you keep loading the cart, we're just going to keep staying right where we are. By the way, let me see how I'm doing here. Dun, dun, dun. I was working with this. we are so good at intellectual development. And we got to be careful we don't get our daubers down, because sometimes we say, oh, the public schools are failing and all that. Some are. Boy, that top group is magnificent. Nobody can develop intellectual strength like these people here. Nobody in the world can. By the way, I just saw in The Economist, you see it? They printed the top MBA schools in the world. The 30 best MBA schools in the world. 20 are US, 9 are Europe, and 1 in Canada. We got 20 of them. None in the Middle East, none in Asia, none in Latin America, none in India. 29 and 1. But here's what we are so good at. If you put 1,000 kids in an auditorium and you have educational psychologists say, line them up by intellectual strength. They'll give them IQ tests, SATs, and all that. And you know what? They'll line them up 1 to 1,000. Perfect agreement, high agreement, smartest to dumbest. And then you know what we know what to do? Take that very top group, send them to the best schools, North Carolina, Michigan, Virginia, or to MIT because they're on their way to NASA or whatever it is. And we are masters at developing intellectual strength. We don't give ourselves enough credit for that. As a matter of fact, if you're somebody real smart in Bangalore or, I don't know, wherever, Riyadh or Moscow, if you really want to know how far your talent can grow, how you can manifest that talent, you got to get to one of these places or you'll never know. So there's that. On the other side of the equation, if you ask those educational psychologists, okay, take the same 1,000 kids, now line them up by their ability to enterprise. You know what you got? You got an argument. You got an argument about whether you can train it, whether you have to identify it. What is it really? I thought innovation and entrepreneurship overlapped and all that. But you see, for as much as we can just nail intellectual strength, IQ, and all of that, that's how much we leave all the other stuff to chance. But I think universities, the best thinking people in our country, have to get together and make that a science that's much more intentional, that's as intentional as we've made developing intellectual strength. Okay. Okay, that's that part. Okay, I want to just make a couple remarks to students, because a few of the campuses that I've been to, they always want to know, what have you seen out there that is best for me as I'm making my own strategy so I can build my own empire, or start at IBM, jump out, or whatever everybody does. I just want to tell you a few of them. Gallup has done a lot to develop this science. The most important thing, and so we've done these studies of leadership, and just actually thousands of them. We got a lot of books around you can read. You can read on this too. They come out of Gallup Press. But this is very simple. You need to know this: your strengths develop and your weaknesses don't. That just kind of lays there. That's because you never heard it before. You'll have strengths. Everybody has some strengths. What happens is that so many places you go, people try to find your weaknesses and say, you need to fix those weaknesses. When that happens, they stop your leadership growth. You can have a lot of things wrong with you and just absolutely build huge empires. The whole question is, do you know what's right with you? You got to get that figured out, and then you got to build your strategy all around that. Gallup is fortunate to have the best clients, and we get to know all kinds. They have nothing in common. But if you don't see what everybody's trying to do to me, all trying to turn us into Jack Welch during my time. You have to become him or Colin Powell. So that's best practices. Then you have to become them. I don't think there's a question. I don't think there's a doubt in the world that slows you down. Ted Turner has nothing in common with Jack Welch or with Meg Whitman. These people all are so different. Dr. Gallup, the guy that founded our company, none of us knew him very well. I'm sorry about these words, but my whole family were teachers. Just a teacher. He always makes the 100 most famous list in America. Not that quacky one that Time Magazine puts out, the good one. With Abraham Lincoln and Washington and all that stuff. He makes that. boy, there was nobody, and I've studied Dr. Gallup more closely, I think, than anybody, but boy, that guy knew his strengths. I was driving him to an airport one afternoon. He knew I was kind of surprised he hadn't built much of an organization. He didn't care. But he said to me, it's one of the few things I can remember in the few conversations, but he said, Jim, he said, I couldn't run a popcorn stand, and I'm proud of it. But he knew exactly who he was. But then I would ask people in Europe, and you know, presidents would call him. I never asked a president that knew him, but I said, how did this guy become so famous? But they said he was the best teacher of his time, the best teacher of presidents and kings and queens and reporters. Every place that he went, he would sit down and he would listen to them. He'd find out what they needed, and then he would teach them something that helped them get their lives done better. But you see the range? I mean, the range of what you can do, if you know your strengths, you really can pull it off from anywhere. What you don't want to do is make a mistake. The other thing, I'm going to speed this up a little bit. A big part, a very successful part of the last 30 years has been built around what I call defensive techniques. Six Sigma, lean thinking, TQM, all that. Wonderful stuff. You all know that stuff, right? Or what all that is. Gallup plugged it. We did ours. Really helped us. GE's been one of the most admired, not as much now. But you know, Jack bought, what, 2,000 companies? Then you buy them, then you cut. And that's where Six Sigma came in. But when you went out to Croytonville, where you were trained as a leader, you couldn't make it unless you learned Six Sigma. You had a black belt Six Sigma. Leadership was cutting. And all of us, and it was perfectionism. And it was great for the country. But I would tell you, if we could just run the clock back 20 years, I would tell you, get good at those, get out of here, I'll get in my car, it's over, that's it. Do that, that's what leadership is. Times have changed. Don't do that. Have people that work for you do that. You need to get good at the offense. The offense is everything now. One of the things that I think happened with Six Sigma and all those types of, is that this happened at Gallup. Remember, you're reducing variation. That's what Deming and everybody figured out. After you get it clear down to here where it's only shaking this much, when it's out here, you got a lot to work with. But after a while, you can't squeeze much more blood out of that turnip. But what companies want now is organic growth. And that when you acquire, it starts to mean that you're a weakness. Nobody likes it as much anymore. Shareholders don't, banks don't, everybody doesn't. But whatever you're studying, if you're trying out for a job or if you're in team meetings or whatever, use your strengths, but aim them at the offense much more than the defense. I want to tell you one that's just sort of odd. This is just an observation that I've made, and a lot of the really kooky winners that I've worked with, they're really honest. Now, you guys are honest, but I want to finish this. Your word is such a big part of your brand. Now, I know that you guys are honest all during the day, but where it makes a lot of difference is you'll be in meetings where something kind of bad has happened, something where you misdelivered with a client and all of that. That's a huge leadership moment. And the big ones, that's where you have courage and boldness and you tell the truth. You don't kind of tell the truth, but you just tell the truth. It becomes a big part of your brand. But if you said when leaders move up through organizations, it's almost always through boldness and courage more than others have. That's almost always how you rise up. If you said, well, what's the activity that you see? They're not afraid during frightening times to tell the truth. But if it becomes part of your brand that you're always telling the truth, it's the best part of your brand you can have, especially in this country. We're way more honest than you ever get credit for. You know, we're kind of down on banks, and you know, banks looted customers a little bit, and Congress and all of that. But still, this is a really, really honest country. But then clear at the other end of that, make everything that you say come true. Don't ever say anything. So if I said, Jim, I'll send you that article. Don't say that unless that article is coming. Because at the very highest levels, he'll either subliminally or intentionally, he'll remember that I said that and didn't send it, and my brand starts to change a little bit. So whether it's the most difficult situation or just simple conversation during the day, if you want to become a big leader, you really got to own that particular value. If you're going to become entrepreneurs, you can think about this a little bit later, but if you try something, it'll always fail. You can't try things. when you say, okay, we're going to start this company, and if we don't have this within 18 months, then we're going to give up. You know what you did? You just told me when you're going to give up. By the way, you ever seen that divorce attorney that wears the fringe leather thing? He comes in from Wyoming on screens. They ask him about high-profile divorces. I can't think of his name. Can anybody think of his name? But anyway, so, what? Yeah, Spence. So anyway, the talking head says to him, by the way, Jerry, how many contracts with stars and all that have you made? And he goes, he knew the exact number. He said 2,500. So he'd made marital contracts, He made 2,500 marital contracts. Perfect question. The guy says, how many of them have worked? How many marriages worked that you contract? And Spence looked at him like he was crazy. He said, none of them. He said, what do you think we were contracting? But it's a lot of that's true with business initiatives. So I started this thing called the World Pool. It cost I think we had $100 million in it, just of our own cash over like 5 years. But somebody said to me, how much longer are we going to try this? It was real important to me. I said, we're not trying anything. We're never going to stop until this thing cash flows. And we won't. But any other attitude guarantees failure. The only way you stop is if the bank comes in, and the only way I'll stop is if the bank comes in and takes the whole damn company away. I don't choose many things, but once you choose them, you're never trying something. Or when you have somebody that works for you, a team member that comes and go, hey, can we try this? Tell them, we don't try things. Tell me what your idea is, but we don't try things. By the way, I've noticed, this is true with me, and I think that some people like to say this because it's fun to say, but it's true. If money's your mission, and you guys ought to just get as rich as you can, but if money's your mission, it doesn't work right. Money's the marbles, you got to count it up and all of that, but you've got to pick something that's so much fun, you like doing it on Saturdays and Sundays and all of that. I'm talking about if you're going to have a real runaway career, you got to love it. If you don't love pizza, don't choose it. And by the way, you can't say this kind of in the environment we live in, but you should be trying to get as rich as you possibly can. You should be. And that's good. It's good for you. It's good for your influence. It's good for the country. It's good for everybody that you work for. That means you're winning. But it can't be your mission and purpose. Your mission and purpose has to be something bigger and richer and more fulfilling, or you just can't really have a big impact. I wanted to say one more thing too. When you're my age, by the way, when you hear anybody, I'm not picking on the president, but say, oh, he's a multimillionaire. When you are standing here, my age, you need to be worth a minimum of $10 million, or you're going to be in a soup line. Because in 30 years, $10 million, what it's going to be paying back might be only $250,000. That'd be about like you getting $40,000 or less now. So what that says is, and I didn't come here to tell you this, but you need to start planning to be, when people say about, oh, multimillionaires, whatever else, you better be planning on being a multimillionaire, or you'll be in the poorhouse. Multimillionaire is not going to be 1% anymore, but so you got to live within your means. And by the way, if you start right now and you run those little linear regressions on increases and all that, you can get there. But you just have to keep it in mind now. I'm going to stop right here. Thank you very much. Got time for a couple of questions. I stopped kind of fast. What's your question?
So I've been told you're an activator and competitor with StrengthsFinder. So with the StrengthsFinder, it gives us our 5 main strengths, and you were referring to that earlier. What about the other 29 other characteristics? I was thinking, like, why do you emphasize this in terms of metrics, like in descending order? For example, you kind of let us off the hook. So I didn't know what your thoughts were on that.
She has, Gallup has a really popular book with college students. It's called StrengthsFinder. So you can go into it and you can you take the book, then there's a code in there, and we found 34 states of mind that you might have. We didn't find 35, 36, didn't find 12, we found that. And the whole theory is, you don't pass or fail the thing. The theory is that know what your top ones are and build your strategy around that. And I think your question is something about the bottom ones. Those would be your weaknesses down at the bottom. And what's your question? Yeah, you can get that from, I think it'd be better if you knew the rest of them. I know mine, but give me your card. Somehow you can get them. Okay, but the reason we didn't is because here's in the psychology, we have a lot of psychologists, and we thought that just throwing out, with some pretty heavy science made by a lot of really good psychologists, that we thought that we might have been overstepping our professional bounds by saying also, here's all the things that are wrong with you. So we thought it was real safe to just say, shut up, here are your 5 strengths. Build everything around that. That was it. But there's a lot of really good companies where they get coaching around all of them. So I hope I answered your question. What's your question up there?
What do you do in your personal life to keep you kind of centered and balanced? Are you religious? Do you do yoga? Do you exercise? What's your...
Yeah, I really look like I exercise. Yeah, I'm a distance runner. That's right. Well, I don't know if you could hear that or not, but he asked what I do. I have kind of I did some interviewing when I was in college. I interviewed a whole bunch of people. I was in a rest area. I did this for the governor so long ago. But I didn't think it would work that I could interview people coming through. He wanted to know why they just drive through Nebraska and don't stop. So I asked him questions like, where are you going? Because you'd be driving from Pennsylvania to Los Angeles trying to get through the square states. So he'd say, how much money are you going to spend? Where are you going to stay? And I thought, nobody's going to answer these questions because they're going to think I'm going to rob them or what the hell's going on. And by the way, the first person that got out of the car was from Pennsylvania. And right away, even clear back, you think about Joe Paterno. And it really shocked me because the guy looked like Joe Paterno that came out. And then I learned that everybody in Pennsylvania looks like Joe. To me, when you're from Nebraska, but even the girls look like Joe Paterno. To me. Yeah. Oh, I bet. Now I should run out of. But no, I get not just Gallup polls, but by the way, if you guys like polls, but my kids are all gone, and my wife and I sit in an apartment in Washington, and this sounds hopeless, but I read polls almost all day, and I send them. I got friends around the world, and they'll send poll back, and they'll say, "What do you think's going to happen in Greece? What do you have? How's hopelessness? You think they're going to stay in the streets and all that?" But I'm so wound up, I do that. By the way, if you go to www.gallup.com, we have 1.6 million world leaders that follow this stuff every day. But down at the bottom, you can type your name, and then you get breaking news. The breaking news is always a poll, so it's not like the CNN guy that sends you out something about Michael Jackson's funeral or whatever. This is only about polls. So my answer is, I do this. I hate golf. I hate country clubs. When you're born and raised in Nebraska, you have no sophistication. I don't understand art. I go down to the Smithsonian. I look around. I wonder who the hell did this stuff. And there's no surface water in Nebraska, so you don't understand sailing at all. I moved out to the East Coast. I couldn't believe that works, where they just. So I'm pretty much stuck with polls. What's your question, Pat?
What's the current Gallup poll prediction on the election?
Okay, that's a deadly question. I'm going to answer that, then we'll end right on time. I want to say one thing. Gallup doesn't work for Democrats or Republicans. We work for no special interest groups. When I'm with pollsters in Washington, we don't even know each other. They've never seen me. I've never seen them. We don't compete for stuff. NRA, all sides of abortion, everybody wants Gallup to do polls. And my assistant, whom you know, Sarah Van Allen, turns down about 1,000 a year. So we're always independent and all that. The Gallup has found that their chairman and CEO is not particularly independent. So it's actually run by somebody other than me, and he and I have agreed that I give him suggestions and he'll take them or not. By the way, it's Dr. Frank Newport, who's probably the most admired pollster in the world is the guy that actually runs it. He's editor-in-chief, and he's very competent and all of that. And so we're not supposed to take sides. I just want to get all that out of the way, Pat, before your awful question here. Just a couple of observations. One is that Romney against Tea Party and Christian right, they overlap like you would not believe, has exacerbated a divide that's in the Republican Party. By the way, right now with Santorum, they're saying he's doing pretty well. It's a lot to think about, but what it is that the Tea Party candidate is the anti-Romney vote. And you could argue that Santorum lost the beauty contest. Remember, it went Bachmann, and then it went Kane, then it went Perry, then it went Newt. You see what I'm... So when they tried everybody but him. So it really would be better if you would have been Newt or somebody. You should have been last, because that has your best chance. So that's a problem that you see now, and that's what we're all reading about. For the Republican Party, it's probably best if Romney wins, because Gallup shows in dead heats that if you were to vote tonight, Romney would probably beat President Obama by about 2 votes. So it's real close right now. So if the election was held tonight, and remember, a lot of stuff can change and all of that. Some people say, well, nobody can beat Obama because they're not high on Romney and blah, 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 blah. You're getting the wrong angle on it. You don't vote. They say, who would vote for somebody, not Obama? That's not what they're doing. You're voting against Obama. And so like when old man Bush lost, he had approval ratings about 90% in February. Then unemployment went up, somewhere above 7. And it even took Ross Perot in there. We didn't elect Clinton the first time. Did the second time, not the first time, because we asked people, we spun in other names. So we spun in Colin Powell. We spun in Norman Schwarzkopf. They just take any of them because you're voting against the president. The president's approval ratings, I think today, I could look, but are about 44%. At 44%, you always lose. You never win at 44%. Nobody ever has. Now, it might get better, but it's really hard to move that. It's really hard to move that number. So that's the negative for the Republicans, and that's the big negative for the Democrats. Both of them have big headwinds. You look for energy. So if you and I run right now, Pat, let's say that you're the Republican and I'm the Democrat, you just get 40%. And even if they don't like you, they're not going to vote for me. I just get 40%. The whole election's over 20%. And some of it's about energy, too. Here's something else. When there's an incumbent and a challenger of the undecideds, 2/3 break to the challenger every time. 2/3, 1/3. So you see that gets pretty, so let's say that there's 6% undecided. 4 will go to Romney, 2 will go to Obama. The other thing that you watch for is energy. So when we ask how excited are you about election and all that, energy's a little bit down in the Democratic Party. That's a headwind. It was high in the Republican Party, now sinking. So there's some headwind there. Now, the thing is about the 40%, how much energy they have. You and I aren't going to change our votes. But what we won't do is we won't go to the nursing home, pick up a bunch of people, put them in the van, and go get them to vote. We also won't give money. You and I'll probably show up. We're good voters, and that's how we do it. So I think you have a real close race. By the way, there's a lot of really odd things that could happen in all of this. Unemployment's probably not going to move much. But what happens is if the markets see that Romney's going to get elected, they could start coming back. Could even start coming back before the election. Voters might not know where to assign that. Right now, you can bet on who's going to win, but most of that they feel is priced into the market now. So there could be that's a negative for Romney and the Republicans. That would be assuming that Romney's going to win it. So he could have a real tricky pitch take him out that way. Because if the market started coming back, Obama will get the credit, even though it's Wall Street seeing that a Republican's coming in. Very complicated. If we'd vote tonight, and it is Romney, I'm not saying that we don't know that, but it looks pretty strong. That's a real close election. Thank you again for having an interest in me and Gallup and all that.
I got an email the other day from a former colleague, and the former colleague said, sort of out of the blue, are you watching The Celebrity Apprentice this year? Which I'm not, but the email said, because you are a dead ringer for Debbie Gibson. And I don't know if that's true or not. I think I'm just relatively nondescript, because everybody always tells me I look like somebody else. But I have to say, as a native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I have never been told that I look like Joe Pa. So that was a first. So we would like to extend our sincere thanks, despite my Joe Pa resemblance, to you, Jim, for being here tonight. On behalf of everybody, our students, our faculty, our staff, members of the Carroll family, members of the Dudley Carroll Society, our community members. I'm sure I'm forgetting to thank someone. That's probably as close as I'll ever come to knowing what it feels like to give an Academy Award speech. But thanks on behalf of everybody. And we have, as a token of our appreciation, a little gift. And I heard a lot about the things you don't like, but I heard football in there, and basketball wasn't necessarily mentioned, but no matter. We have here a hat and a shirt for you, and if you might do us a little favor, and that is Saturday night at about 7 o'clock, if you would just put this on, we here would very much appreciate it. So. All right, and you know the drill. That's the end of our official programming. Thanks for being here, everybody. Drive safe, and we hope to see you at our next event on the 26th.